I grew up in America. The girls are half. When we came back, they were in Korea for 6 months. And when they came back, all they wanted was American food. They're like, give me an In-N-Out burger, give me a Shake Shack burger, give me some pizza. Because it's like they just had so much Korean food over the past like 6 months.
That's funny.
Is she a chef or an eclectic chef?
Is she a what?
Korean specialty chef? Is that her?
Yeah, she is Korean. Her mom ran a restaurant. She's a chef, and then her job is she's a cooking instructor. So pre-COVID, she would teach cooking classes like in our house. Like, so a dozen or so people would come over. She's done team building exercises, one-off people, they would come to the house and learn to make all Korean dishes. And like you make it, then you eat it. And so it's like a 4-hour experience.
Could we do that virtually with her?
She's really not doing virtual. It's just because she's not great. Like it doesn't feel as intimate. Like the way the class works is like it's very highly connective. And then I think a lot of times the ingredients are just hard to find. Like she provides all the ingredients. So when you get here, and virtually we were, how would you find like, you have to buy a lot of these different sauces and things like that. Like potentially you may never use again. So it just is something that we were like, it wasn't really worth pursuing.
Marvin, so I happen to notice it looks like the Nike slogan. Is that on your shirt?
Yes, it is a Nike shirt.
So it begs the question, why the Nike slogan?
Well, because versus what? Versus like nothing or versus?
Like what like you obviously sounds like you worked at Nike, right? So
yeah, I worked there for 10 or so years. So I still am a big fan. I'm a shareholder. I think it's probably one of the best marketing slogans in the world still, but it just happened to be the black shirt that I pulled out of the closet this morning.
Gotcha. Okay. Very good. Makes sense.
So what time are we going live? I'm just trying.
Everyone ready? Yeah, as long as you guys are ready, we'll start now.
Yeah. Thanks, Marvin.
Okay, I'm going to do a countdown for everyone, just so you all know. So we're going to start in 3, 2, 1.
So good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I think it might be 11 where our guest is right now. So I'll say almost good morning. But I'm Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council. This is very exciting, great way for us to have an afternoon chat. Really appreciate having Marvin Chow with us. In a second, I'm going to introduce him. And this is our CMO, Chief Marketing Officer Insight Series. And I want to give a shout out to Shelby Mastovich, who's on our team. And she leads these efforts in addition to all the other things that she does. But she has been really doing a great job of trying to make sure that we have thought leaders and people who are doing things to change the world inside of tech companies and having a chance to talk with our community. So today is no different. We're talking about leading practices. We're going to talk about hopefully some fun stuff in terms of what's new, maybe guessing what's ahead in the future. And, we feel like we're part of the global community, and today is no exception. But I do want to give a shout out to our partner today, and that goes to, actually our lead sponsor, and that goes to the Berardi Group. And Jill Berardi, I actually have had the opportunity of knowing Jill. I want to say it's about 12 years, and she'll correct me if I'm incorrect because she's a data person, so she'll make sure I have it right. But the Berardi Group is a marketing consultancy helping business owners using branding and promotion to gain new customers, visibility and sales. And they have a very unique model. They enable companies to rent a CMO and to tap sort of the counsel and the wisdom of experienced marketing strategists for a fraction of the cost of full-time staff. So, during the conversation that we'll have a chance to talk to Marvin, we'll know that there's lots to this landscape. I personally don't know how anyone can be in this role of CMO and sort of keep a handle on all the things that are sort of coming at them and trying to have a step ahead. They have a fractional model which tends to work really well for companies entering a new market and introducing a new product or looking to pivot. And all of us can relate to that thanks to COVID and this new world that we continue to be in. So it's run by Jill Berardi. As I mentioned before, I've known her before. She's actually given me, myself in the role that I have, a ton of wisdom over the years. And she's had over 3 decades of doing this kind of work with startups, with agencies, with private companies, you know, you name it. She was at Snap Retail. She was at a tech startup called Impact, and on and on. But overall, just get to know her. She's a good egg. She's just filled and packed with wisdom, and really appreciate her being with us today. So I want to welcome, and I think we're doing this in partnership, right, Shelby? We're doing it in partnership with who else?
The American Marketing Association.
The American Marketing Association. Okay. So you can tell we have a nice group of people here today, but I want to just jump in and I want to introduce Marvin Chow. He is the Vice President of Global Marketing at Google. And essentially, and Marvin's going to correct me, but I mean, essentially he leads brand, right? Product growth, performance marketing, you know, for some of Google's largest and most strategic, you know, products that some of you have definitely not only heard of, but are embedded into your work. So that's, you know, Google Assistant, search, maps, photos, Gmail, news, AR, VR, and Google AI. And many of you may know, even we in Pittsburgh, we have a nice presence with Google AI with Andrew Moore as well, who's a longtime friend of the tech community and mine as well, and the Tech Council. So Marvin has, you know, a really small job. He oversees, you know, Google's global efforts in social media and developer marketing. So including the marquee event, Google I/O. So Marvin, I'm going to stop talking for a second. I want to bring you on, say good morning. I know you just woke up, having some breakfast. Marvin sleeps in every day until about 10:45. So thank you so much for being here with us, and thank you everyone for joining us. So Marvin, before we start the conversation, what I really love to do, and I think is really important, is to just say, who is Marvin? Who is Marvin, the man, the husband, the parent? Because, and I say that because we're going to talk a little bit about this whole notion of empathy and empathic work and how that weaves into the work that you do. So is that a good segue into the conversation?
It's a tough segue, you know, for 11 o'clock in the morning, but
I know.
It is great to see you again. It's been a while since we met in person, so we're excited to be here. I know that's a big question. I think, I don't know, like I love my job. I love technology. I love culture. I'm curious. I've had the chance to live overseas in Asia, like Japan, Korea, Japan for a number of years. I've lived in, I think, 6 or 7 cities in the US, never Pittsburgh, but, you know, definitely a big fan of Three Rivers.
So you never know. You never know.
I know. I do remember when I was in college, I worked for Boston College for the football team. So I do remember playing Pitt and having to go into that stadium and kind of, you know, usually win in Pitt, which is always fun going in, but never fun leaving. But it's a beautiful city. I have 2 daughters, you know, 7-year-old and 9-year-old girls. So sleeping in at 10:45 is challenging a lot of times because they're active. They're they're definitely very active children. I'm a very proud girl dad. You know, my older plays tennis. It's just learning to drop in the half pipe. My younger plays soccer.
Nice.
You know, piano. So I think we're doing good there. And my wife, as you know, is Korean. She's a Korean cooking instructor. She used to run pre-COVID a startup called parkskitchen.com where she taught people Korean cooking. So I get to eat well on most days. I get to spend a lot of time with my girls now that I'm working from home. And, you know, I got a pretty cool job at Google. So I think,
yeah,
you know,
you definitely have a pretty cool. So now that now that we've said some of that, what about, so this professional journey that you've had, because you've done gigs, you know, in China, you've done, you know, you've sort of bounced around a little bit. Talk about that and tell me, was it crafted or is it all of it accidental?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, for me, it's always been like half skill, half dumb luck, and I'm not a planner. Like I've never had a 5-year plan. I've never had a 10-year plan. I really do think of my life in 18 to 24 month chunks in the sense that I can try anything for 18 to 24 months. And if it doesn't pan out, it's going to be okay. And even, when I first went to Nike, which, it seems like a no brainer, but I was living in New York. I really didn't want to move to Portland. They'd offered me 2 jobs and I had said no twice. And it wasn't until I met at the time the CMO, Trevor Edwards, where I was like, I really want to learn from this guy. I will move to Portland and do this.
Wow.
And, I did that. And then when they offered me to move to Korea, I was like, sure. I'm like, I'll go to Korea. And I thought I would go for 2 years. And I went for 2 years and I moved to Japan for 3 years and I moved to China for 2 years. And it just kept going. And then even when I left Nike, I remember when I left Nike to come to Google, it was still early. It was 2009, 2010. Mark Parker, who was the president of Nike at the time, said I was making a huge career mistake. And I was kind of like, I'm going to try this Google thing out for 2 years. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to come beg for my job back. Because I just think if it doesn't work out, you can always try something else. So it's been all by accident. It's all driven by really like a natural curiosity. Like I never lived overseas. I was really curious about it. Like when I went to Google, I was really, it was still early. Like when I went to Google, I think the first iPhone had just been out for like a year. They had just acquired YouTube, was just starting up. Facebook was maybe 2 years old at the time. So it was still early, but I was kind of like, this is where things were going. I was really curious. I was lucky to be living in China at the time where companies like Tencent and Baidu were already making huge advances. So I could almost see where technology was going to go from living in China for the rest of the world. And so I, at the time, it felt like a big risk. And looking back, I was like, well, why wouldn't you go to, it's always hindsight's easier. But so it's always been fly by the seat of your pants. I think now that I have a family and 2 girls, it's maybe a little less so. I don't think I can just on a whim move to Paris for a new job tomorrow. But, I'd like to dream.
Yeah. I mean, so how many languages do you speak fluently?
Oh God. I mean, fluently, 1, English. I mean, like
okay, what
just
about
the 1.
Second tier.
I can speak a little bit of Chinese. It's my parents' native language. And I can, I have taxi Japanese and taxi Korean. Like I can get around in taxi, I can order in a restaurant. My girls are fluent in Korean, Chinese, and English. My wife is fluent in Korean, Japanese, and English. So, I mean, we are a multilingual household in some ways.
Yeah, that's way fun. That's way fun.
Yeah.
So talk about your work at Google. And I'm going to start with this and then we're going to dig around a little bit.
Yeah.
So what's a day like for you? Now, I know you're just waking up right now. So, so if I were to follow you around, what's a day? So what's ahead for you today?
I mean, it's a good question. I think, in my job, I mean, like anyone else like I have a lot of meetings and that was like a big adjustment for Google. I probably carry 20 to 24 meetings a day, so from, 8 to 6, Google, today's a rare day because I'm with you for a while, but we do 15-minute meetings. We do 30-minute meetings. It's a lot of context switching. Like, I'm switching from, how do we look at new growth programs for a product. I'm looking at how are we building a narrative around, a new product we're launching, an emerging product. You may have just saw we released, Sundar released a blog post this morning about a lot of our efforts around helping with the COVID vaccine in terms of how we're opening up sites and promoting.
Oh,
so I've been
nice.
working on that for a couple of weeks. It's reviews, looking at product reviews, where a product roadmap's going. It's creative reviews, like campaigns that are coming out. So it's a lot of context switching. It's a lot of meetings, particularly during work, this kind of remote period, because you're not getting that hallway check-in with people. So really, kind of hanging out, like a lot of meetings. You have to be intentional, like the 15-minute meeting or the, just to touch base with someone. How are they doing? You got people, I've got a number of a couple of my leads coming back from mat leave. So we're doing kind of casual check-ins, like how are they doing? So it is quite honestly a little bit of everything, and it's intense. And the most complex part is the context switching, to go from let's talk about this to now let's talk about something completely different with a completely different group of people. But that's also kind of what I love about what I do.
Yeah. And you've been there, what, 10 years?
10 years. Yeah. My 2-year bet has now parlayed into 10 years. So it makes me feel old in a lot of ways. And, when I got to Google, it was maybe 20,000 people. And we used to they would talk about the early days, and, it's so big now when I got there 10 years ago. And now it's just, it's a force.
It is a force. So let's do a little bit of reflections on COVID and the implications, right? Let's start talking about marketing, like new consumer behaviors, new business models, after the market crash, like in 2008. What's your take on that? What are you living each and every day?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think we're, 9 months in. I think it's far from over. I think everyone knows that. I think a big part of what we do is to try to figure out how it's impacting the way people are approaching their daily life, how it's impacting how they're making decisions, and where things are going. And like I said, it's hard. It's a hard thing to do when it's not over, and still so many people are getting sick. So many people are dying. Like I know in Allegheny County, where you guys are, it's incredibly hard hit. But I looked the numbers up over the weekend. I think you guys are on a really good downward trend over the 7-day period. So hopefully that sticks for you guys. But for us, I think, there's like anything, it's like there's phases. Like the initial phase was shock. It was like this new thing. Everyone's working from home. It's like, how do you put Band-Aid and duct tape on your life? You're dealing with, some people are dealing with kids or taking care of parents or others and working from home. And, after the first couple of months, we started to settle in. It's like, okay, well, this is a thing. And, it's going to start to impact a lot of how we make choices, how we use technology, and a couple areas that, at least that we've started to find really interesting, which is, nothing, completely new, but I think some of the areas that we're looking at, like e-commerce is the first obvious one. I mean, we're seeing massive growth, but not just growth. I mean, the first part is, I think in the first 3 months of the pandemic, you had the same adoption of e-commerce in the US as the last 10 years. So anytime you guys see a hockey stick curve like that, you're like, something is happening in terms of the growth. But then the real question is, how much of that behavior sticks? And you're starting to see some interesting data. Like in Europe, 60% of shoppers say that they will continue to shop online, post-COVID. And Europe is an area where e-commerce adoption was notoriously low. Markets like Germany and France, you're seeing things like grocery shopping really pick up. You're seeing things like just regular household goods shopping pick up. As we were talking earlier, like, my wife is a chef. We never got into online grocery shopping because she likes to go to the grocery store. She likes to go to multiple grocery stores to look at the things. And I don't know if we'll ever get there, but we definitely have a hybrid model where we're ordering online. You kind of have to. So I think e-commerce is going to create this really interesting boom overall. And then you're going to start to see, even within that, how are people, with all the socio-economic things happening in the background, how are people, particularly younger generations, going to spend their money? And we're looking at a lot of things like shopping your values. Like, Harvey at Shopify talks about, people, they're going to spend $100. Do they want to spend it on a big company, or do they want to spend it on a local store down the street, or a female-led owned business, or a Black-owned business? How are they going to put their buying power to work? So I think you're going to see a lot of great evolution in terms of how people are looking at e-commerce. I mean, that's one of the biggest ones that I think we look at. And as a part of that, I think local is going to be really big. We're seeing, I'm sure like you guys, you never talked as much about your county as you have in the last year. And we're seeing local newspapers are being read more and more. People are searching for local. Searches for local are up 80%. Local restaurants, local dry cleaners, local bookstores. So I think supporting small and local businesses is going to bring people together, hopefully in a new and interesting way. So in that world, those things are really, really interesting, I feel like, in terms of where in a post-COVID type of scenario, we're going to see technology start to innovate.
Well, I think your point on values, shaping consumer decisions. Are you seeing any other trends, anything that you can sort of just share with us at the macro level? I mean, I agree with you that I think we're going to be local and we're going to be non-local, right? And I know right? I mean, the hybrid kind of thing almost applies to everything, school, food, restaurants, et cetera. But are there any little nuances that you're seeing that you really think will take hold that we won't go back to?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, in shopping or just in general?
In general, in general.
In general, I mean, one of the areas that I think everyone's really hot on is the healthcare industry. And I think the healthcare industry is one of those industries that is, I don't know if it's ripe for innovation, but I think obviously there's a lot of important legal protections there. But, in COVID, you've seen the rise of things like telemedicine, companies like Teladoc and things like that. I think this is an area where, you can press a button and have food delivered and have a car pick you up and all these things, but you still have to go to a doctor for certain things. And I think the ability that for certain types of areas, and even in COVID, like, in the early days of COVID, they didn't want people to go to the hospital. They wanted people to call ahead, do a telescreen. They wanted to screen people ahead. So I think telemedicine is going to be one of those categories that really starts to accelerate kind of post-COVID. And you're seeing like the size of the market. I mean, some people estimate it's going to grow like 10x over time. I think we've already rolled out a lot of features in search and maps, where if you're searching for a doctor or a clinic near you, we'll start to give you telemedicine options where, hopefully eventually down by your insurance provider, things like that, we can tell you, oh, here's another option. Instead of going, you can log on to this thing and do one medical or this healthcare thing. And so I think that's an area where those things will start to stick, because that is a pain point for a lot of people, like scheduling that doctor's appointment, having to take time off from work, like go to that place. And I think we're seeing the spikes in things like get online care, get virtual care. Those search spikes are continuing to go up. So I do think that's an area where it's still early, but it's early enough where I think new technology will come in, new companies will come in, and I think there's a consumer demand there. Just like as you were mentioning, like you look at post 2008 financial crisis, where the sharing economy really took off. Like there was this consumer insight of ownership was not as important, on demand was really important, and there was this marketplace of freelancers that weren't full-time workers that needed second jobs and things like that. And I think those secondary factors that coming out of that crisis led to a lot of that. I think you'll see similar types of things coming, because telemedicine also allows people to work remotely at the other side of the marketplace. So I don't know. I personally think there's some interesting things that are going to happen in that space.
How big of a team do you have?
How big of a team do I have? I mean, at Google, we're just one big team. We're one big family. Okay. There's a lot of us.
One big family. Okay, so it's a cozy, 50, 60,000 people. Nice.
Exactly. I honestly don't know the number. I mean, I think because there's people that work directly for me on the global team and the US team, and then we have people around the world. I mean, it's one of the best things about the company is a global company. So we've got people in Europe and Latin America and Asia working on all types of products. So I mean, and then there's the scale of Google allows us to have that level of investment to make sure that people are benefiting from technology kind of everywhere. Because I think what's so interesting in my early days at Google is looking at so many of the markets outside of the US where technology is going to leapfrog the current legacy systems and really impact billions of people, hopefully in a positive way.
Well, so what about what's up at Google? How about, are there, I know that there are efforts to like double down on timely and accurate info. There's lots of things in the news. There's, even locally, there have been editorial boards talking about, the dangers of big tech and Google. And, I just have to tell you that our relationship and in our city and in our region, the relationship with Google has been just amazing. And to watch, to be thankful for what you've actually laid the groundwork for companies to proliferate has, I can't imagine that we would have been that far without Google. So it's always fascinating to sort of see the other side. But I know that you're working on, accurate info, timely info, et cetera. Any thoughts about how that's embedded into your work?
No, I mean, I think it's a great question. It's embedded in everything we do. I mean, I think it's really the core mission of the company. Like if you go back to, Larry, in terms of like, organizing the world's information and making it universally accessible and useful. Like there has been no more important time than now for that to be a thing. I mean, with the rise of fake news and misinformation, when you look at the elections that were coming up, clearly COVID in the early days, getting the most accurate information out was critical. But then even now with the vaccine coming, people want facts. People want to know, like, what is it? Where can I get it? What are the side effects? What are people saying about it? And I think that we really look at this time as one of these areas where the impetus of the company was never more important for people, because this is what people need and what people want. I mean, spikes in search obviously around COVID were massive in the early days and continue to be that way. And I think that, it really becomes like our mission, our responsibility to provide that information to people. And I think it's as easy as it sounds. I think once again, with the rise of misinformation and things like that, it becomes harder and harder. In a lot of ways, it's important just to help people, like in the sense of vaccines, get the information they want and be able to make the right judgment for what is right for them. Because it's not our job to predict what's right for everybody. It's not our job to kind of tell everyone what to do. But I think Google's just founded on this notion that the more informed you are, the better decisions you can make, the better you can progress in a lot of areas. And I think that it's just so important to us.
I like to think of it like in Google we trust, like that, right? And so what about AR? Are you doing anything?
Yeah, I mean, AR is super fun. I mean, like, we love AR. I think it's still, this is one of the things that I say that I love about my job is, like, you've got search and maps that are like pretty established categories everyone knows. But then you have things like AR, and it's like kind of just so new, and you're like, you don't know what the applications are going to be, you don't know where it's going to go. And I think what I find interesting, like, going back to our mission, like there's tons of great AR work going on, like with companies like Snap and lenses and filters and tons of fun stuff. And it's not that we're not a fun company, but you go back to, like, as an information company, how do we think about AR? And so I think that's been really a great lens to think through. And I think what was so fascinating during the pandemic, like I think last year or 2 years ago at Google I/O, we launched this thing called AR Animals, because where it's like, you can see an animal in your living room. And I think it's partially, and my kids love it, like to be able to see the detail, but the size, like how big is a bear, like a grizzly bear on its two hind legs, how big is a shark and things like that. And we launched it, and it was, you could Google an animal and you could see it, and it did okay, and it was great. And then I think somewhere along the first parental breaking point of the pandemic, I want to say it was around like May, where you're like, what am I going to do with my kids in the house? Right. It just took off on social, and we saw like a 50x increase in usage of this feature, and of people like bringing tigers and octopuses like into their living room to share their kids and have their kids play with it. We worked with Jurassic Park, and I put like a dinosaur, a T-Rex in my backyard, and we just did Baby Yoda for the holidays. So it's super fun in that sense. And so I think that's an area where it's a really great application, more for kids. But then if you get even further down, what we think about is what are the types of things that are just easier to explain through like a 3D model than words or images or video. And like, there's a lot of opportunities around like learning about like health, like what does a heart look like? How does a heart beat? Like if you can see that in 3D, those are kind of interesting things, definitely medical terms. How do certain mechanical things work in 3D? You can really understand them. And so there's a whole world of being able to apply the idea of learning and getting more information, but visually and an interlocking way that is interesting. And then finally, I think, it's still super early, but like shopping is, we talked about the growth in e-commerce, like AR and shopping, I think is going to move from that novelty to a more integrated experience. I think that particularly as you shop more online, people are going to expect brands and products to have more of an AR experience. And we're seeing it, like 90% of shoppers want to visualize things like home decor. That's the first, like, what does a sofa look like in your house? But the other one is like beauty, what is an eyeliner, makeup? And Warby Parker does a great job with glasses you can try on. What does lipstick look like? What does, different kinds of makeup look like. Cars are another one. Like, you know, I'm not a big car guy, but people want to see, like, what does a car look like in their driveway? Does it fit in their garage? Like, you know, that kind of thing. And so, you know, going to a car showroom, I think Tesla even showed this. It's like kind of like a weird experience, you know? And so I think that, you know, you'll start to see more and more opportunities for certain categories where people want to engage with a product in a new way that they're in control. Like in a car, you can zoom through the inside, get a sense of what it feels like. It's not exactly it's not exactly right, but you're in control and you get to kind of pick and choose like what that experience is for you. So, you know, I don't want to be overly bullish on AR, but I think once again, the factors around the rise in e-commerce, you know, trying to figure out how new categories of products are sold online, and then obviously more smartphone adoption. I do think AR is going to move from that novelty thing into something that is going to be really valuable for people moving forward.
And I would agree with you. The question is, when's the right time for marketing to get involved in that, right? Like, you know, do you spend all the time planning for it, or how do you bring that into the application of your work?
Yeah, I think there's always something. I mean, it's always hard to, it's a great question. It's always hard to predict when is the right time. But I do think, particularly in a technology company, you know, part of our job is to evangelize and bring the magic to people like on the early side. Like it may not be the biggest usage, it may not be the biggest moneymaker if it's e-commerce and like that. But I think, you know, particularly nowadays, I think people have this desire to kind of see what's new, like what's coming. And so if it fits your brand, if it fits who you are as a company, I think that, you know, earlier is always going to be a little bit better if you can manage that risk of like, what is the investment model? Like, you know, I don't think we would, you know, in a marketing world, it may not be ready for the Super Bowl, but it's definitely ready for people to start to try and start to experiment with these areas. And I think we've seen a lot of great, like the car companies are doing well with it. I think makeup companies are doing interesting stuff with AR. And so I think that because it's kind of like, I look at the Warby Parker thing as a good example. And it's not our product, but like people are buying these glasses on, like they have a great brand, they're already buying them online. So it's just an additional experience that even if it's for 10 or 15% of the people, is going to be really valuable to them.
Right. It's interesting because if you think about the transformation that has occurred in the digitization of companies since COVID, right? There are people who had like 5-year plans on their migration for their digital strategy. And then all of a sudden, like they executed in 6 weeks, right?
Yes.
It's sort of like a live or die kind of thing. And so that's really where my question was coming from in terms of the AR. Because imagine if there's another mutation or there's another, you know, whatever happens. I'm not trying to be a doomsayer, but if there is something like that, I can imagine that AR would be sort of that next rapid pivot.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for a while, I mean, you know, based on people's behavior, there's going to be a level, even with the vaccine, of just hesitancy in certain areas, like, you know, or like prevention because of pre-existing conditions and things like that. So part of it may be like finding the right niche on things. I think what's kind of not ironic, but challenging in some of the technologies, you look at some of the groups that are most impacted, let's say kind of the elderly, you know, are the least technology savvy, right? So there's a whole gap there of like, you know, I mean, how many of us have been on with a grandparent trying to explain like a video call or a Google Meet or a Zoom call to them, you know, but they're the people that kind of need it the most, but they are the least equipped. So making it easy and turnkey for different communities will also be an interesting opportunity.
Well, if you think about it, you think about the boomer generation, I think they're going to be like half the population in the United States in the next 10 years. So the opportunity for that group to embrace technology, I would think, is pretty high.
It's going to be pretty high. That's what
I
huge
think
so. So yeah.
So what are you proud of or blown away by over this last year? Like even on the work of Google, or what just totally surprised by?
I mean, it's a good question. I would say like on a personal level, like I've been really, you know, like I said, I have 2 young girls, 7 and 9. I've been really impressed by how they've handled all the change, you know, like the schooling and the lack of connection to friends. I mean, like you never, you know, you always, and not always, but I think either always underestimate or overestimate a kid's capacity. But, you know, I really am proud of how my girls handled the changes that happened throughout the year and how understanding everything from the racial movements around Black Lives Matter all the way through COVID and through the elections. It was pretty impressive to see as your kids grow up. I think professionally, sorry, go ahead.
Keep going. I just want you to know we do have some questions. I'm going to grab them.
Yeah.
Keep going. Professionally,
I mean, I have to say, I mean, I was lucky enough to be, one of the 3 executives that led the COVID task force, for Google. And I think, I was just talking to one of our APMMs. It's like, I remember early, I was in New York the first week where it happened, and I ended up working from New York. We ended up launching all the stuff on Surge, the big Do the 5 campaign. I remember just like how an entire company came together with a single purpose of like, we have to help everyone be informed on everything going on. And I think that looking back, it was just so proud of to be able to work at a company to help people at that level and to see people come together at that level was really something that I will remember kind of for the rest of my life. And there was one scene I just thought vividly where I was in New York in a hotel room and my wife was out and I had my 2 girls and I was on a call with Mike Pence's team. And they were bothering me and I literally gave them my phone and I was like, sit in the bathtub and watch this video and do not come out for 20 minutes because I have to talk to the office of the vice president.
Sit in the bathtub, that's a story. They will remember that story.
Yeah, hopefully. It was just, but it was just amazing to see like how everyone put everything aside to help everybody. So, that is a very proud moment.
That's cool. So we're going to jump to a couple of questions. We have a question from Nishad, who is saying, Marvin, could you please share any information on Google's plans with the recent $4.5 billion investment with Reliance Jio platform in India?
I'm not super familiar with that. Is that the overall investment in India?
It just says in the Reliance JIO platform.
Reliance Jio is a carrier that we have a great relationship with. I actually don't know exactly what he's referring to. I know we have committed to investing a lot in India. I think we just recently made 2 investments in 2 medium-sized startups in India. So it's a market that, we think is a tremendous opportunity where technology move the market forward, but I don't know specifically on the geo part he's referring to. I apologize.
Okay, that's okay. And then this is from Maria Ali. She's asking what are the specific trends you're seeing coming up in marketing and what are some ways young professionals can prepare for a more competitive, world later on?
It's a great question. I think like in marketing there's always going to be like the yin and the yang. I think creatively there is a lot of evolution on one, how do you produce storytelling? Like how do you shoot commercials in a COVID world? How do you look at animation? There's a lot of that constraint that is being put on that people are navigating. I think a lot of brands are navigating, it's your puppy. A lot of brands are navigating what is the right tone you should be taking, like based on your category, your brand, is it, I think this year's Super Bowl will be really interesting in terms of like, what kind of tone are we going to take? Is it, optimistic? Is it empathetic to the situation? Because I think COVID is one of these things that obviously a year in, it impacts so many communities so differently. Like obviously we've read that, communities of color and underrepresented communities are more highly impacted, the elderly. And so I think figuring out creative and tone is something that a lot of brands are struggling through. I think with the economy, you're seeing that a lot of people are relooking at their marketing stack, like what technology should they be using to be more efficient in the way they're deploying marketing. And I think even in Pittsburgh, I think the team in the Pittsburgh team does a ton of work around AI and our advertising business and, how do we scale the cloud business using AI and ML. And I think those types of tools are things that brands are thinking about in terms of how do they scale, because I think everyone's budgets are tight. Everyone's trying to get the most return on their investment as they can, whether it's a brand investment or like a direct revenue investment. But people, I think, are re-looking at that stack as a chance to say we could be doing things differently and more effectively. And so that's the thing that people are looking at. And along with that, I do think, for marketers, I was just talking to a woman, I think having a better sense of AI, not the technical side of AI, but honestly, how does it work? How, because it's a horizontal tool, how can it be applied to different businesses? I mean, what we've seen is from speech recognition to image recognition to e-commerce recommendations to, ad serving, AI can really help create a new way of deploying information or technology. And I think as a marketer, understanding that and what's possible is going to be really, really important. I think you're on mute still, Audrey. You're still on mute.
Okay, there you go. Sorry so much for having dogs. So Jeremy mentioned, Jeremy Bourne saying, what about some B2B strategies or use cases that have impressed you at Google?
Yeah, it's a good question. I work less in the B2B space, but I think that, at certain levels, I mean, I think if you look at what I'll call the C levels, I think all the fancy dinners and all the conferences, that's gone away. You really had to go back to kind of those small, intimate panels or panel discussions or, video chat calls, but really have to figure out ways to build and maintain those relationships at scale, which I think has been challenging in that. On the more lead gen kind of work, I go back to some of the AI work, like some of the AI automation that we use to deploy targeting, to look at probability of kind of adoption or a lead gen is really, really strong in those areas. And so there are a lot of great tools out there where that's happening. But I do work not as close to the B2B side of it, but that's an area that I think is really emerging.
That's totally fair. And understand that we're just in love that you're here. So we're just taking advantage of that.
I can talk about anything.
So what about, the last 12 months, right? Rapid change, massive pivots. What are something, this is Lauren's asking a question about, what is something that your team's prioritizing in 2021 that was not even on your radar you were thinking about in 2020?
Oh, geez, that's a great question. What was not on my radar?
Right.
I mean, everything's on the radar. It's just how big is it on the radar? I think
maybe it's a weighted value. Maybe it's
I think it's a weighted value. But I think, from a marketing point of view, I do think we're going to the same question is like, what is the tone of the brand going into 2021 around the world, different countries around the world, with sports and the Olympics, like how much do we weight being normal, like back to normal, and how much do we weight being empathetic to the situation? And this is an ongoing continuum that we are looking at having. I think, on the weighted scale, like vaccines is a huge focus for us. And I think it's very different than COVID wave 1 in general. And so thinking through different ways we can help with information, we're working with public health organizations to promote vaccine facts and things like that. So that's a big one that is very top of mind. And the other one, which I'll cheat a little, which was very top of mind going in 2020, but I think needs to get increases, like kind of the empathy on your team. I think the hardest thing for us is like, just how do we stay connected? How do the managers and the leads stay connected to their team? Is everyone doing okay? I think everyone's situation is so unique, between, kids or family or loved ones or isolation, that making sure that people are doing okay and that they're equipped to kind of do their job and operate as best as they can. And when they can't, knowing when to know that it's okay for them to take a break or, take a little bit of a breath or take leave. I think this is one of the things that I fear the most coming out of the pandemic is kind of the mental health toll, the team toll. I don't know if this is exactly true, but I read something in Japan, like more people have died from suicide during COVID than actual COVID because of the isolation and the loneliness and some of the things that they're missing. And that is like the side effects that we are completely unprepared for in terms of like where things will go with this. And so I don't want to be doomsday either, but this is something that even amongst the people that you work with and care so much about, I think you cannot lose sight of that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a new role of leadership that
totally different.
Right. That you wouldn't have had on your radar as much.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for your candor there. And then Jill from Shell Games is actually saying, what trends are you seeing with brands seeking inclusivity and diversity? You spoke to some of that earlier. And I know you've done, there's this whole thing about empathy and empathic marketing, et cetera, which I think is part of that. Can you speak to that question?
Yeah, I mean, this is it's been a great awakening for so many brands, particularly so many American brands. I think that, and at Google, we have a massive plan for all of this. And what I would say is that it varies by company, but it has to feel natural. I think the hardest thing for a company is to have never been part of something and then kind of co-opt it or just run a spot and then feel out of place. That's one thing you have to be careful of. And the other thing is you have to think about, are you solving the problem or just kind of marketing something? And I think like at Google, I mean, we talk about hiring a ton. We talk about onboarding in terms of inclusivity a ton. We talk about how we represent inclusion in our tools so that the tools you use are helping people. Like, we started identifying Black-owned businesses and be able to search for Black-owned businesses. It was a breakout search. And then we talk about how do we bring these problems to light in our marketing. And I think you have to have some level of commitment to solving the problem, not just to incorporating it into one thing that you do. And I think that's everyone you talk to the community about that. I think that's one of the number one things is like, are you really fully committed or are you just kind of capturing a moment in that sense? And we talk a lot about, for example, I mean, Black History Month is I think in 7 days. Right. I think there's a level from a marketing point of view. I'm like, what are we running in this space that's not in Black History Month? Because it's not just the token like, oh, Black History Month is incredibly important. Right. Obviously, we have a ton of great work. But beyond that, there's obviously other areas and other groups we need to be making sure that we are representing more broadly in our products and our communications and obviously internally in our hiring, basically. So I just think be fully on board.
Yeah, that whole thing of authenticity has created a new operant definition these days, I think. And I think people are right to be able to say, what's real? What does it mean? And what does inclusivity mean? Particularly
with younger generations, I mean, they see it. I mean, like every young generation ahead of them, they see through, they see through the veneer and things like that. And not every company is perfect. I don't think people are looking for perfection, but I think they're looking for, kind of a long-standing commitment to something.
Mm-hmm. It's a shift. I think it's just a shift, right? We're probably at an inflection point for a shift. So here's someone, Marvin, who's asking, this is Griffin, saying that he works for a CPG company. And they, do you see a role for traditional marketing tactics in the future? Or do you see the pendulum continuing to swing towards more digital and more targeted marketing? So that's the tension, right? That's the tension of the new world.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's already swinging in some ways. I mean, digital is so hard to define. So I think there's certain traditional things like, TV advertising is continuing to be strong, but the blur between TV and things like YouTube and video, whether you're watching it on Hulu or on YouTube versus, kind of satellite TV, it's becoming really blurred. So TV will continue to be really important. I think in CPG, I think other areas, and I've never worked in CPG, but I imagine you have to reimagine is like couponing or something like that, or sampling. Like, how do those things start to transition into a more digital world? Like, I've always been a believer, there's nearly no Uber like loyalty program for anything, for coffee or for CPG products or retailers. And I think this is one of these areas where you can imagine that like really broad-based loyalty programs will come up because that's what you want. You want to know what people buy. You want to know what you can offer them a free sample of in a targeted way versus standing in the aisle at Whole Foods or Costco giving out things. And so I think there are certain things like that that may have to be reimagined in this new world, for like what is digital. But I think a lot of traditional things will continue to carry on. I think people will watch TV, people will see billboards. I mean, obviously commuting traffic is down, but there'll be new versions of those things.
That's interesting. So that you're bullish on that. So, this whole thing of working remotely now, right? We're in our, I don't know, what are we in our 10th month?
Maybe 9th or 10th month.
Yeah. So what's going on with Google? How has that been? And where do you think it's headed?
I mean, who knows where it's at? It's been, I won't say it's been good. I mean, I think even Google, maybe this makes, Google for any company I've ever worked in, has been the most set up to be remote. Like we video, we Google Meet on our phone. Like that one of the first COVID calls I ever took out after the bathtub call was like literally from my car parked on like in the East Village outside of a dim sum restaurant. So, I mean, we're set up, but no one was prepared for everything, like the school from home, the taking care of your kids, like not having a good desk. Like I don't have a home office, like a desk set up, like all of those things. But so I think that it hit everyone like a ton of bricks. And I think one of the nice things about Google is I think, it's been important for Sundar and the leadership to give visibility, so for us, they've extended, kind of this voluntary work from home option through next September. So it helps people know, like, I know that me and my team are going to be in this situation for 9 more months. And so I can at least plan and adjust. So I think that's actually a really, really nice thing. Now, moving forward, I mean, who knows? I think for Google, we've always believed that, the part of the magic of Google is when we come together, when we collaborate in the office, and how we build that community and empathy to build great products. And so that has to be a part of what we do. And I think we're still going through, when it's safe, what is that flexible work model for us, which will be still coming to the office, but still allowing people to work from home or remotely. I think beyond Google, there will be jobs that are great for remote work. 100% companies will have this, and that will be a hybrid model. But I think the next space in some of these things that I think, if you think of it as an entrepreneur, or even as a consumer insights that need to be tackled, are things like tools. Like the tools that we have now are still pretty rudimentary in terms of like remote work. I mean, like it's great that, like Google Meet has released some wonderful new features around closed captioning, but the tools have to get better. And there's going to be a ton of great startups that do that, which I think is going to be wonderful. And along the same lines, I think, working remote work for this extended period of time, it has mental health tolls that we mentioned earlier, like work-life boundaries. It's like, when am I on? When am I off? Like, you're starting to see that, this fake commute thing start to take into effect, where people they need that mental break away from maybe their family or their work to have space in their head, and so that mental toll is something that needs to be think about. And then also, we haven't even begun to think about the disadvantage to remote work. Like there's certain groups, I mean, like women, as an example, have been disproportionately impacted by work from home, not because of their jobs, but because, women who are primary daycarers have been remotely impacted. So they can't have childcare, which means it's harder for them to work remote at home. Some jobs can't be remote. So I think we have to have a sense of, what is the inclusivity around working from home, either from an accessibility point of view, underrepresented communities, and I don't think we've really thought through a lot of that. I think there's some companies that are kind of really on the everything remote bandwagon. And I think that there needs to be a little bit more thought around the longer term implications and for people and for companies, quite honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we have heard other people, other companies in the Valley have just said, we're never going to go back to the office. And those are pretty big names. And they're saying we're never going back.
Yeah, and I think, who knows if the pendulum will swing back. I think, Reed, I think from Netflix was another one who said, he was very vocal, like he doesn't believe that, that 100% remote is going to be the answer. And, like anything, it's going to be a hybrid. I think, some jobs will work really well remotely. Some jobs will still require people to be together to be really effective. And at least I can say personally, like I enjoy being in the office. Like I enjoy, maybe because I'm in the market, but I enjoy being around colleagues. I work better when I am bouncing ideas off other people and things like that. And that's just me personally. And so I think there is a large group of people who want that in their life. And so
yeah, I think it's important because not one person can actually solve a problem. Yeah. I mean, if you look in this world that we're all sitting in tech and innovation and marketing, not one, you have to know your customers, you have to know your partners, and it's not always easy to schedule it. But there is something that is happening that you can feel is shifting in terms of people moving to other locations and deciding, oh, I can live in Wyoming and still work for, whoever, right? Yeah. And I can have my, so I think those kinds of things, as well as a policy, we're going to see some shifts as well. Now, there was one statement in here from Kalani saying most, if not all, the jobs lost or quit in the last few months have been by women in America.
Yeah.
I don't know what the data point is on that, but it's probably pretty large.
There's definitely a lot of data points around that. And I think only half of I think women have only gained back less than half of the jobs that have been lost. So when you look at, as the economy starts to slowly recover, women are gaining less back than men, their men counterparts in terms of like the jobs gained back. And so there's a lot of just still to be thinking around the disproportional impacts of some of these decisions, basically.
Well, we've had a hoot hanging out with you here. I'm trying to make sure that I'm being sensitive to time. I could shoot the crap with you for months, for hours. And I love your extemporaneous and authentic self, which has been just delightful. Is there a question that you thought that I should have asked that you're surprised I didn't ask?
No, I mean, you were very thorough as usual.
Very thorough, huh? So like a virtual physical exam.
A virtual physical in terms of, yes, like learning about Google and things. No, I mean, I honestly covered a lot. I mean, I really enjoyed it. Once again, you came and spoke to my team a couple months ago, year and a half ago, and you were one of their favorites. So I'm happy to come and talk to your community, and I would love to get back to Pittsburgh one day. I think it's just such a
we want you back here. We want you back here. Because you brought a lot of people, so people might not know when he's making a reference to Google makes a commitment, particularly the team that he leads, is to make sure they go to different locations, and then they have their annual event where everyone comes together, and then they're sort of, because they don't know each other, right? And so then they're able to do some offsites. And it was really cool to be able to hear what the priorities are in terms of your folks, because they're not represented in Pittsburgh, right? We have a lot of
and it's a different type of inclusion, like just under I think coming to Google for me for the first time, like San Francisco is wonderful, but it's a bubble, it's an industry town. And I think to your point, we try to bring everyone out to just get a sense of like how are different communities thinking about the world of technology. So we've done the big cities like New York, LA, we did Chicago, we did Pittsburgh was our last one, or unfortunately the last one we've done. And so to get back. I had like some of the best. I feel like I had the best pastrami sandwich I've ever had.
Yeah, I know. I think
right by the office, there was one. I felt like
they did everyone who's from Pittsburgh on the call. They did the classic Pittsburgh stuff. Okay, so I think they did like a Primanti's. They did a donut.
That's what it was.
Donut things. Yeah. So they were very intentional, as you can imagine. We have one last question here, and it's from Katie Bicknell. She's saying, with the elimination of third-party cookies by 2022, what's the advice for marketers? How about that for a wrap up?
That's a great question. We can spend a lot of time talking about this. I don't have a great answer for you because I think it's still evolving. I think you're seeing, you'll see some announcements from, Safari and Chrome coming up. I think what I would just say is continue to watch the space. I mean, we are very conscious of not just the advertisers in terms of what they need to do, but this is such a huge revenue stream for small publishers and bloggers that ecosystem is really, really important to us. So I think we are working through a number of areas where we can help both advertisers and publishers. I don't have that. It's not my direct area off the top of my head, but if you follow up with me, I can probably send you some things, and there'll probably be some announcements in the next like this quarter is my guess.
And so what about if people want to reach out to you? First of all, I know probably thousands of people want to reach out to you, but I thought I'd put you on the spot. Will you give your cell phone number out?
Yeah, of course. Like I think Twitter and LinkedIn are probably the best ways to reach out to me. Like I'm the real Marvin on Twitter and on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on both, and so it may take me a while, but I will definitely try to get back to you with specific things if I can. But yeah, definitely feel free to ping me or add me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and mention that this was kind of where you heard from me, and I'm happy to kind of connect.
Well, I think it's great. So Shelby, before we end and go to this next part of the show, I'm going to, first of all, thank Berardi, the Berardi Group. If you don't know them, you should, because there's lots of opportunities to use the expertise of the team that she's amassed, which is advice on on all CMO related things, including fractional use of CMOs. Jill's been active in our community for quite a long time and leading a lot of companies who have done well. So I want to give a shout out. And of course, to our partners at the Marketing Association, thanking them. But Shelby, what's next? So Shelby, what's next on our program here? Do we have Marvin for like the next 3 hours or what?
So after this, anyone is welcome to stay for networking. So that way we can talk about everything we learned from Marvin and just meet with one another as well.
So Marvin, you're more than welcome to stay, but I know that you have a really busy day ahead. It's probably close to lunchtime for you now, right?
Yeah. I wish I could, but unfortunately I can't.
I know.
Next
so
time.
You're terrific. Thank you so much. You can follow up on the Real Marvin at Twitter. And you know, he also writes on Medium. You might want to look at his last article that he talked about what it meant to be a good father to his 2 girls. It's a great read. It's a quick read, but it's an impactful read. You did a good job. I meant to tell you that, Marvin. You really did. It was really great. And I'm glad that you're safe. I'm glad that you're still in the role that you're in. I don't think you're going anywhere soon. You're having way too much fun and doing too many different things. The world of marketing is just changing each and every minute. But I want to thank Google. First of all, I really want to thank Google here in Pittsburgh because they have really been at the forefront for what is now known as a very strong tech ecosystem here in Pittsburgh. And it was thanks to the leadership of Google, who have helped proliferate so much of the innovation here, and through investment and through partnership and through the people that they've attracted here. So I meant that with all, you know, sincerity. They've been tremendous partners.
Well, I mean, just from us, like ditto. I mean, I think once again, I've enjoyed meeting you and working with the council, and I know Todd and Andrew, you know, value your partnership so strongly in the work that we get to do together. And once again, Pittsburgh's it's such a wonderful town with such great talent. So I think we're really proud of everything that's been accomplished there.
It's great. So Shelby, on with the show. You're going to take the next one. Marvin, great seeing you. Thank you so much for your time. And everyone else, you can stay on. We can have some time to chat. And thanks, Marvin. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, Shelby. Thank you, bye, Audrey.
So anyone that's still on, Taylor will be sending you into breakout rooms, and we'll try at the last few minutes here to have a couple at least different sessions. So stay tuned.
And thank you, Jill. Thank you, Jill Berardi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jill.